And any of us who have dealt with a call from God can go back into our lives at times when God has confirmed his call in our lives. It probably didn't happen the same way it happened with Jesus. It probably didn't happen the same way that God confirmed my call with me. And I want to challenge you that every calling is not to a pulpit. That there is a fivefold ministry. There are gifts that God give us that we can use for the benefit of the kingdom of God. And there are things that God keeps pulling us to. And I tell people, you know, these things that are going on in our communities, they resonate with me because I know it is something that God has called me to because of how it hits me when they happen. I do not like to see when people are treated unfairly. You know, whatever the rule is, let that rule be for everybody. But when I see people who are operating with one rule for one group of people and another rule for another group of people, it don't have to always be racial. It can be because you're my friend, or we grew up together, or you're from my neighborhood, or we're all in this particular group together. No, let the rule be the same for everybody. And if it's not, then just say that. And when I see it, those are things that get to me. And I learned years ago that those things may affect me. And everybody might say, yeah, I believe that everybody should be treated fairly, but it doesn't resonate with them the same way. It doesn't make them bad. It's just something that God has placed in me. And if he placed it in you, whatever it is that gets under your skin like that there's a reason for it, that God is calling you to that space. Everybody's not called to the same space. Everybody's not going to be as passionate about it as you. It doesn't make them bad. They have other things that God has placed in them that they become incredibly passionate about. And whatever those is, you give them, whatever those things are, you give them the space to work their passions as God is giving you space to work yours. And I may not be one who have the passion to champion your issue, but I'll come stand in the group when you need somebody to show that there are people who agree with your cause, and folk need to see 250,000 people who marched on Washington, probably not all as passionate as Dr. King was about treating everybody fairly and fixing a lot of these laws that were not right for all the people. I don't believe everybody who marched on Washington were as passionate as King was, but they were willing to be in the crowd to say, we agree with him. And while I may not be as passionate about the thing that God has placed in your heart, I'll stand in the crowd and say, I agree with them. And you may not be as passionate about the things that God has placed in me, but I need you to come stand in the crowd and say, I agree with him. Because that is how you advocate for the change that needs to happen. Somebody's got to lead. And I believe God is calling us to lead. God has placed something in your heart that when it happens, it drives you batty because you want to see it better. Whatever that is, it keeps happening because God is saying, what are you going to do about it? I'll tell you a quick story. I told you, I'm one of those that I don't like to see people treated unfairly. And when I was young in the military, people used to call me Malcolm Farrakhan. When I was a young enlisted soldier, and I would get put on a detail, and I would be the one saying, ain't slavery over? Why the only people on this detail are black when there are more than black people in the unit? And then people be like, uh-oh, here comes Malcolm Farrakhan. That would always be the joke. Here comes Malcolm Farrakhan, that I'm out here championing the issues. And then I got deployed as a lieutenant. I went away to school. I got deployed as a lieutenant. I got promoted, and I was on a deployment, and I saw some things that just weren't right. People were being treated differently based on where they lived in the community. They were getting promoted. Other people who I believed and what I saw were more qualified were not being promoted. Other people were. And I believe God dropped it in my spirit. Okay, Lieutenant, what are you going to do, Malcolm Farrakhan? When you were an E4 just talking about it, now you're a leader. You're either going to put up or you're going to shut up. What are you going to do? And I thought it would be hypocritical, as much as I complained about that stuff when I was not in a position to be the change. I am now in a place where I can be the change, but I'm not the senior leader of the organization. So how can I influence those leaders to do something different? And when I did it, I was branded a racist. I was branded the one who was causing trouble. I was branded the one who didn't know what he was talking about because they didn't know my background and the things that I knew. I just didn't tell them, but I knew because I worked in them prior to my transition from enlisted to officer. I knew how systems worked. I knew how the process was supposed to work, and it wasn't working the way it was designed to work. And when I brought it up, I just transferred back into the state from a different state. People thought I didn't understand it. I understood it clearly. And so I told them, this is how it's supposed to work. And when I did it, I ended up getting, I don't even want to use the word blackball, but I was the one that got ostracized as the one who was the troublemaker. But when I went back several years later, a lot of those people that I was advocating for, who were not being given opportunities to serve at higher levels, were retiring from the military 10, 15 years later, senior ranking in their fields. I don't know if that happened because of the chances I was taking as a young lieutenant. I don't know if that's why it happened. But what I do know was that I was not going to allow myself to be branded a hypocrite by God when I had been speaking against that very thing when I was not in a position to say something about it. And now I am, and I would just, cow into the corner and just, act like it's not happening. And so the challenge for us, and one of the things we're going to talk about leadership is painful at times. The cost of leadership sometimes, it's not glorious. Sometimes it is painful. When people don't quite understand why you're doing what you're doing, or when you're making a stance or a position and people who are in positions of power see what you're doing as challenging their authority. It's not easy, particularly when they are in a position to influence your career in a positive or negative way. I had to make a decision really early, and this is how I live my life. That one day my career is going to be over and I'm going to look in the mirror, and the person I'm looking at, I want to still like that guy. And I am unwilling to sacrifice other people to better my own career. And I was willing to walk away as a lieutenant. And I'm not going to sacrifice my integrity on the altar of continuing to advance in any organization for that matter. I'll leave the church before I have to compromise my integrity. It doesn't matter to me. At the end of the day, I feel like Dr. King did at the end of his life when he said, everybody wants to live a long life. He said, but at this point, it doesn't matter to me anymore. That at the end of the day, if it costs me my life for the betterment of the people that I'm fighting for, then so be it. That at the end of the day, if living means sacrificing who I am, then I'm no longer living. I'm not who I am if I've got to sacrifice who I am. And so Jesus, if you think about this, every disciple who died very brutal deaths, all they had to say was that Jesus didn't return from the grave. And the punishments, the beatings, the crucifixions, all of it would stop. And they all said, I will not deny what I've seen with my own eyes. Do your worst, but I will not deny the God that I serve. And if it means that I've got that it all ends here, that my career ends here, that it all falls apart in every other way, if I come away with my integrity intact, then it is worth it. but that sometimes is the cost of leadership. And are we willing to lose it if it means losing it all at the expense of my integrity? Then you can have it. I'll figure it out. And so it's a calling. And if it's truly a calling, then if we don't see the calling as all encompassing of our entire lives, of no matter where I am, no matter where God blesses me to be, think about this. Many of you right now, God is putting you in some very incredible places. I know people that I met who've gone on to be with the Lord. When they look back over their lives, they told me things like, God has allowed me to be in places that growing up, I never would have fathomed I would be. Then my question back to each of you, that as God is moving you into all of these places, are you going to take him with you? Are you going to still allow your light to shine no matter where you are, no matter where God blesses you to be? Listen, God is blessing you to be there.